Hey guys, how you doing? I'm Kent Tilley, and OMG, Chad Weeb is here with me. This is the first time we've ever actually filmed together in the same physical space, and that's for a reason. We brought Chad in. We were doing some planning, and the main purpose of our planning together while he was in town was to tell you guys about our fee changes, and we're also going to get some photos done. So, you know, that should be fun. That's why we look sharp today, or relatively okay. Now, first we're going to get to the why, and that's kind of where I come in, and then Chad's going to explain how, and then we're going to talk about, you know, a few reasons behind this decision, just from specific examples that we've both had over the years in different firms and at K4. So when I started this company, my whole goal was to be like, okay, I want to differentiate the role between a financial planner and an investment advisor. I wanted to somehow create a model where people knew that they were paying for a service and not for me to be a salesperson to them. And I thought about this like over the years and over, and like, how do we get this right? And I believe that we've got it as close to right as possible. Is it perfect? No, but we got it as good as we can, that we feel there's a fairness to us in all situations, but also a fairness to our clients in all situations. And that's the big thing, is about fairness in my mind. This is certainly not the way for us to make the most money in this business. I mean, this is not the most capitalistic way of running a practice in this business. There are tons of people that, you know, in my mind, are less successful than we are as a firm that make way more money than we do. It's just the way that it is because of the model. So that's the big thing, is like, how did we come to this? And it all came down to being fair. Let us differentiate the role between a planner and an advisor and the investment management, especially now with DIY coming into place. We're huge believers in planning, but we're not believers in the fact that we should make a crazy amount of money because somebody's successful, because that doesn't necessarily make their planning 10 times harder than somebody that's not. Why are we earning 10 times as much just because they're successful, even though they're easier? But it wasn't, we kind of thought about it a few times and we're like, well, what if we charge people based on complexity? But that gets too challenging. It's too much thought that goes into it. So it's like, sometimes we're going to be working, and for some people and making, you know, less per hour for sure, but, you know, it's still a fair value, we feel. So I'll let Chad kind of explain sort of the three ways that this works. And it always starts with the $500 plan.
Yeah, so like Kent said, we always start with a $500 financial plan. We're going to talk more about vision as well, and disrupting this industry is one of the big parts of our vision here. And that's step one. Beyond the $500 financial plan, for those that continue to want to work with K4, we're dividing the clientele into three different sections. So those that want to move your investments to K4 and our portfolio management partner, Modern Advisor, and have less than $250,000 of investments. Those that want to move their investments to K4 and have over $250,000 of investments, and those that want to continue investing DIY or the way you're doing, but just want to have that advisory of K4 along the way. So for segment A, $250,000 or under, moving your investments, the way our fee is going to break down is, in total to you, it's 1.6%. So when you're at a traditional institution, you're looking at usually MER, or management expense ratios, and then there's trading expense ratio and dealer costs and all these different things. And usually they're adding up to somewhere in the mid twos. We feel like we're being competitive and fair, to go back to that word, at 1.6%. The way that breaks out is there's 1% K4 advisory fee, Modern Advisor charges 0.4%, and then we have an ETF fee within the actual investments that we select that on average works out to 0.2%. It does vary based on risk tolerance, but it's a very, very
Pretty
small
much 0.2.
variation. So 0.2 is a reasonable thing to say at this point. If you are over that $250,000 mark, and part of the reason we set it up this way is to incentivize us to get our clients to the $250,000 mark as well. But once we get to the $250,000 mark, our K4 advisory fee is capped. So at $2,400 a year actually is where it caps. So we do not continue to earn more on an individual household after $250,000. So like Kent was saying, it's not that someone with 2.5 million deserves to or has to pay us 10 times more. It's all about that fairness. So we cap our fee. Modern Advisor, their fee is a percentage, so it stays static. But as your investments continue to grow, you can actually see the percentage, the fee actually starts to drop off pretty significantly. Then we have population C, or the third group there, where you want to continue doing DIY. And this has been a real recent realization for us that people really enjoy DIY investing. It's more accessible than ever. It's easier than ever. There's a lot more information on there. However, having that piece of advice, which taxation of this, like which account, has the most tax advantage to me? Where should I be taking my income? Things like that. That's where we come into play. So the K4 advisory fee when you're doing DIY, instead of capping at $2,400, is actually $2,000 a year. We're not doing quite as much work. We're not transferring accounts. We're not administering transactions. So we charge a little bit less. And that has been a real kind of revelation in the last month or so. So that's been really great.
Yeah, that was a big thing. I mean, we've been talking about it a lot as sort of a hybrid between AUM and fee for service, which was like, in my belief is straight AUM is not proper, and straight fee for service doesn't work for a lot of people, especially if, say, you have $100,000 and you're like, I can't afford to pay you guys $2,000 a year. You're paying $1,000 out of the investments, and our goal is to get you to that $250,000 threshold. There is something that's good about AUM in the sense that it is kind of good for an advisor to have some incentive, some skin in the game to try and get you there. There is financial motivation, but at some point in time, that financial motivation can become a huge conflict of interest. So just for example, let's say, you have $250,000 with us, and you have $500,000 in a pension, and your choice is either keep it in the pension plan, or you can commute that $500,000 to us. In a traditional model, now the firm is going to be making an extra $5,000 a year off of you indefinitely, just because we tried to sell you on this idea. So that's how I've sort of said, I don't want you to feel like I'm ever selling you anything, because that makes me uncomfortable, and it actually makes me worse at my job, because I'm bad at saying, now I feel bad. I don't deserve to make an extra $5,000 a year, even though I might think that this is the right idea. And it becomes like this internal battle that I've always had with myself in this business. So that sort of takes that out of the equation where, as a firm, we're trying to say, you shouldn't be working with somebody that's whole purpose of their advice is to make more money for themselves and the firm, but actually put your best interest first. We do not have a fiduciary duty really in Canada, with the exception of maybe 20 people or something like that. It's not high, but this is as close as we could get to proving that, your best interests are coming before our own, but this is also a fair compensation model to us. In some cases, we're still going to sometimes feel overpaid, but other times underpaid. So where do we find that right balance? And that's where we came to these numbers.
All right, so I had talked about vision earlier, and that's again why I'm out here in Edmonton right now. Kent and I are meeting to talk about vision, what the next steps are for this business. And I use the word disruptive, and we're going to share some stories later of why, like, part of the reason why we want to start disrupting this industry and things we've seen and things that we'd like to change. And that's a big part of our vision. Disrupting the industry, being fair to our clients, being fair to ourselves. Like, these are some of the things that we really want to get into. We want to start creating a brand that is all about making a difference. We want to count, instead of dollar figures on our checks, we want to start counting happy dances and people that are excited to retire and things like that. And like, that's what I've been kind of tallying for the last couple of months, because that's what it's all about.
You know, and you're absolutely right. Like, the thing that drives me in this business is not the money, and it never has been about the money, but those special meetings that, like, I never kind of want to give up on, because I love how much, you know, they bring sort of happiness to me when you get to say, like, you worked so hard and you did it, and let us help you through this if you want our help. Um, and I've talked a lot about, like, treating us like we're in your corner. It's sort of been a thing for me for many years, is like, do you want me or Chad or whoever you're working with to be in your corner for those challenging times or those big questions, or to help you make a decision? But so when I started this company, I had grand plans, and you know, they didn't quite work out quite as crazily as I had anticipated, but it has been a super fun journey, and I've learned so much about, like, actually how I wanted this to work as I've worked through trial and error and done so many different things. And but the main thing was that my vision was never, Kent, you are going to create this giant individual practice where you are, like, one of the best or biggest advisors in the country. It was more like, let's get other advisors to come because this model is better and it's going to help more Canadians. How many people can I actually help individually? That number is very, very low. So that's why we're trying to expand with this new model. I don't know how fast we will try to expand. That is up to something that we'll talk about as we work our way through this, and try and perfect sort of our service model, and figure out a lot of the things that Chad and I are working on. But this is about, you know, really educating and disrupting because of the things that we see that drive us absolutely bananas with lack of transparency, or overcharging people for really providing very little in return, other than hoping that the market is going to be like, well, you're lucky that you paid us only $8,000 a year because the market made you 20. And it's like, well, that had nothing to do with the advisor. So why are they earning so much based on that? And that's the thing, is like, we're calling these companies and corporations into account, and the more people we can have spreading this word through people that are watching this video, or more advisors, like I said to the guys in the summer, we are trying to create an army of advisors that are out there working to help the middle class. This is the sector of the population that is being forgotten about, because either you don't have enough money, that nobody wants to talk to you because they don't care, because the model isn't paying them enough, or we're only talking to people because they have this much. And we don't want to exclude, we want to be fair, and we want to say this is all that is wrong with the industry, but there are things that are really right about it, and we think that this job is really important for not everybody, but a lot of people. Right? Like, that's why the $500 plan comes into play, because some people we can look after 15 minutes and be like, you're good. Like, here's a couple tips. Go on your own merry way for 5 years. Like, that doesn't take us a lot of work, but sometimes it's like, we got 19 steps to put into play here. We can't do that for $500, but we will do it if if you want to work with us in this future capacity. And that might not even last forever. So let's talk about a couple stories that Chad and I both have from our time at K4 and past firms about what has been sometimes unfair to us for, not being paid enough for our services, or just seeing people that are paying way too much.
So one of the things that like kind of brought to light how impactful fees are for your investment returns and like how it impacts people. This is actually way back when I was in my first or second year in this industry. I went to a massive like rah event for the institution I was working at the time. Like pump you up, everything's great here. And at one of the like evening like dinner staff party things, we had the Bare Naked Ladies play. And I, at the time, was like in my mid 20s. I was like, holy, this is incredibly
Awesome,
cool.
yeah.
And I was taking pictures of it, and I remember sending it to my dad and being like, Dad, look at how cool this is with the Bare Naked Ladies playing. And his response, which I don't think he meant to like install a moment that I'll never forget or anything like
Right.
that, but his response was, that's where my fees go to. I was like,
Right.
whoa, I did not see that coming. I hadn't pieced it together yet. And that was, again, it was an off the cuff text, and it was super impactful. And that's when I started realizing, oh yeah, fees have a pretty big impact on people's outcomes. So.
Right. And I mean, that's the thing. We used to win trips. We used to go to these things, that's where your fees are going. We don't win trips here. We don't have a box at the hockey game. We don't send our clients to plays or have like big fancy dinner parties, because we're like, how about you just save $5,000 a year, and instead of coming to our sweet fancy dinner party with a $80 steak, you take your family on a vacation every year with the fee savings. So, I mean, I've talked about other firms where I found it was unfair to the client. We see this all the time where we're like, you're paying, $15,000, $20,000 a year. I've never charged anybody that much money. If they have a lot and they move it, I would have always been like, let's just charge you, 0.5 or 0.4 or whatever. But one of my biggest clients, and this is one of my favorite stories that I have about what is unfair to clients and why I was like, let's cap this, is they came to us a couple years ago, really, really good shape for retirement, pretty easy plan, but wanted some help and guidance along the way. And so they had transferred, pretty much the bulk of their assets to us. And our first review meeting in person, basically, I go out to their beautiful lake property. That's their retirement property. They walk me around the property for a couple hours. We have, a coffee or whatever. Show me like the steps that went into building this dream property of theirs over well over a decade. Sit down for a meeting, talk for 10 minutes. They're like, yep, we're still fine. Everything's good. I said, great. Go for a ride in their beautiful boat around the lake, have a beer together. I drive home, and I ran the math, and I was like, I made $4,500 to do that? That is ridiculous. So I was like, I can't charge you guys that much. Just in my head, that is way too much. But I was still giving them a huge deal on what they would have been paying elsewhere. So it was like, where's that line, right? How do I find that line where we're being like, well, I don't feel like that's fair, especially once we get through maybe the first couple years of retirement that are really hands-on, but then it starts being like, that's almost autopilot. Now we're just there to, be emotional support and help people make big decisions. I've said many times now, I just start to feel like a financial therapist more than a financial planner. And here's a couple tips. Here's a couple tips after a meeting. And most times people are just like, I feel better because we had this conversation. And I'm like, okay, maybe that's worth about what we're charged, right? You know what I mean? And in those years, or emergency situations. But then I've also talked about it being unfair to us. And an easy example would be, let's say, you're under the 250 threshold, but you have 200,000 and you have 4 accounts, and you say, Chad, okay, I want all of the benefits of this service, but I'm only going to move 50,000 to you. And then so it's like, okay, well, we're going to make, $500 as a firm a year. Chad's not going to earn all $500 to do that. And you have that other money on the table that maybe somebody else is earning, more than us, even though you're not getting advice from them. You're just nervous about moving the money or something. And I've had a giant case like this where the biggest client that ever reached out, or potential client that ever reached out to me, had multiples of millions of dollars. And they asked me if they thought they could retire. I kind of laughed, like when they told me all the numbers. I was like, is this a serious question? I asked them, and they were serious. And a month later, even though they had another advisor that had, a pretty substantial chunk of their business was making $20,000 a year to be their advisor, had never told them that they were okay to retire. 1 month later, they retire and they say, okay, Kent, we're going to test you out and give you $100,000. And I knew that there was several $1,000,000 out there that somebody else was charging them a bunch of money on, and I was their planner and only earning a fraction of what this other person was charging, but I was doing the work. And I felt really upset about that. I was, somewhat feel betrayed by that, because that's just not really fair to me. So it says, we won't allow that to happen. If you say that, we will just say, sorry, we only have a limited capacity for how many clients we want our K4 advisors to take on. That's a number that we have internally. And if you're not a good fit, then we can say that, and that's fine, for us and for you. So, anything to add?
No.
So, thank you. Please subscribe, reach out for the $500 plan, and if you feel like we'd be a good fit, there you have it.